Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Scott Edinburgh. I'm the founder of Personal MBA Coach, and I'm here today to introduce the session and go further. I just want to make sure, Abhijit, you can see the slides that I'm presenting. Perfect. Okay, great. Yeah, so a little bit about Personal MBA Coach, and then we'll get into the interview where Nicole is interviewing a CBS admissions director, Jordan. So Personal MBA Coach, we're a top-ranked admissions consultancy on a variety of different websites. I presented at the GMAC conference with all the admissions directors. Overall, we have a 96% success rate. And last year, our clients got in with $6.5 million in scholarships. We're family operated. I run the company with my sister, and all clients get support either from myself or a former admissions director on the team. We have a proprietary project management system that we use to help the whole process. I actually founded the company about 14 years ago. I went to MIT for undergrad, Wharton for my MBA, and I just started helping some of my friends get into business schools, help some more, and we just sort of expanded from there. I'm joined by Nicole Shea, who's a former associate director of admissions at Columbia from 2015 until 2021. And we also have MJ Shores on our team, who used to be admissions director at Wharton and UCLA. A little bit more about what we do at Personal MBA Coach. So we can help you through all the parts of the application process. Let's say you're early and you're not ready to start applying yet. We have these early planning packages to figure out, what are all the things you want to be doing to improve yourself between now and when you apply. And when Nicole works with clients on those, she's really trying to figure out, should you start a new organization? Should you get on the leadership board here? Do you need to visit these schools? That sort of thing. We have some of the best tutors in the industry, GMAT, GRE, and executive assessment tutoring, and all of our tutors have at least a 780 or above. We have in-house software that we're using to guide through the session. This is all private one-on-one tutoring. And lastly, once we get to the interview phase, we have a lot of former interviewers, some mock interviewers, some M7 schools, and many of the other top 10 programs. And so we help folks through all the parts of the process, from story development, brainstorming, essay creation. And we also do a lot of engagement with admissions directors throughout the year. We'll travel and give talks at different events. And so we do have some of the highest success rates in the industry. So now we're going to go over to the video, and I have to stop sharing and share the video. So give me 1 second. And then we'll come back to
admissions at Columbia Business School. I want to spend the bulk of the time today being able to learn more about Columbia Business School, the admissions process, and Jordan in this interview. So thanks so much, Jordan, for joining us. You and I know each other really well. I spent 6 years on the admissions committee from 2015 to earlier this year, March of 2021. And we worked very closely together. And so I am so appreciative that you are here chatting with me. It's great to see your face again, given that we sat right behind each other for many years. And so I'd love for you to start off by telling me how you first got involved in admissions.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me, Nicole. Really happy to be here, and likewise, always happy to see you. My journey to admissions is sort of non-traditional, as with most, admissions officers. I'd say the majority of my professional career was really spent focusing on recruiting, but more in the HR space. So I did a lot of HR and recruiting prior to coming to Columbia. I worked in a startup environment. I worked in a more established corporate environment. And one of my really close friends, personal friends, for a long time was a CBS admissions team member. She then went on to work at another part of the school. But at every opportunity she had, she would tell me what an awesome place it was to work, an impactful place it was to work, Columbia Business School overall, but specifically on the admissions team. So in 2017, there was a role that was available that was specifically on the diversity recruitment team within our admissions, the MBA admissions office. And I jumped on the opportunity. I had a phone call. I remember where I was. It was on like 50th Street between Park and Madison, having a phone call with Amanda Carlson, who's our Dean of Admissions. And I just fell in love with what she spoke about her experience, and the impact that I could have on prospective students and admitted students and current students as an admissions officer. So jumped on the opportunity and sort of haven't looked back. Fast forward 4+ a little bit years, and here we are. So.
Awesome. I love hearing your story because even though I know it brings me back to interviewing with Amanda, the way that she speaks about the team, the work we do, the students and the alumni, that I say we, but that you guys engaged in and that I engaged with. It just is such a pleasant place kind of in all dimensions.
Yeah, and I think you picked up on the we. That's the feeling that I had when I spoke to her, when I spoke to the team members. It very much felt like a community, not just the admissions team, but CBS. I felt like, okay, this is a place I want to be a part of. I had always really focused on every job I chose was really focused on, okay, would I be proud to be a part of this brand? And I felt that the we is something you still carry with you, even though you're not a member of the team. But I think that is, an important element of the Columbia experience and the Columbia vibe. It's a place you want to be a part of.
Absolutely. And I felt like students would say that all the time too, that it was somewhat pleasantly surprising. So what excites you most about your work?
Yeah, I think this actually dovetails nicely with what we were just talking about, which is really the people. I get to speak to unbelievable people, whether it's my colleagues, whether it's prospective students, of all different types, right? We have several different entry points, different programs, one Columbia MBA, of course, but we have our executive MBA programs, our full-time program, and then our deferred enrollment program, which is designed for college students, and first-year master students who want to apply and defer for the future. So, I get to speak to people from all different walks of life. Usually get to meet people on the road. Of course, this virtual environment is a blessing and a curse. I, of course, would prefer to be doing this interview in person with you, but really have had an opportunity to get to really engage with people on an ongoing basis all over the world, which we had in spurts when we would travel on the road, but really have had more meaningful, I'd say, and lengthier relationship building opportunities just given the virtual environment. But our team not only works with each other and with prospective students, we also work with our current students, and they're a huge part of what we do within admissions. They really help us not only welcome prospective students, but also welcome admitted students and get them excited about the opportunity to join Columbia. So I think just the variety of backgrounds. I didn't even get to touch on our faculty members and other centers and program staff, but the people they are the people that are, get me up and motivated every single day to come to work or to open my laptop from home and, just learn something new. So when I stop doing that, when I stop being excited by the people, I think it'll be time to retire. But given my, focus, I studied sociology and anthropology in college. I have a master's in adult learning and leadership. So people are what motivate me. I think that will continue to be the case for a long time.
Absolutely, a great team, great students, great alums. I think I was talking to you somewhat recently about this. When I had to make the move to Houston, Texas, I could think of a handful of alums who I was very close with and still remain close with, and who reached out, and they were so excited that I was moving to Houston. They sent me guides. They set me up for lunches with their parents and their siblings and their friends. And this is, years after they graduated. So I would completely agree that is something that really motivated me throughout my time and continues to kind of shape who I am, both personally and professionally. So focusing on Columbia, what changes are you looking forward to on campus over the next year?
Yeah, so I think the biggest one that's top of mind, and you were with Columbia for even years before I was, so you know this has been sort of top of mind for the school for a long time, is our move to 2 buildings on our brand new campus that is being called the Manhattanville campus, part of Columbia University. So we are, as we speak, packing up, getting ready to go, and we will be moving in December, but opening our doors for our students, faculty, and staff to be in full force, teaching, learning, collaborating come January 2022. So very excited about that. And I think that that's probably the biggest change that's, you know, on the horizon for us. Everything from, you know, how we talk about the new campuses, how we experience them, how our students collaborate within them is a lot of change, and change we're really excited for. But probably number one, and I think, you know, later in this conversation, we'll probably talk a little bit about the future of the school. I think that was something that you wanted us to cover. So there's some other stuff that I'll talk about then, but Manhattanville is very exciting. Can't wait to see what that's gonna be like.
Yeah, I will admit I'm a little bit sad that I spent 6 years following the construction, following the fundraising, and then, you know, had to make my departure, you know, not even a year before you guys will step foot on campus. But I think it's going to be amazing for students. The way that it was built was to allow for more collaboration, allow for more of that like surprise encounters with people that you might not have otherwise had. So professors collaborating, students and professors, a little bit different than Uris. Of course, Uris has like a very special place in my heart, as it does so many alums, but I can't wait to, hopefully you guys will have me come visit you.
Yes, please. Well, as soon as campus is reopened to visitors,
of course,
you will have to come back. But I think one of the other exciting components about the move is, as you mentioned, Uris Hall is, you know, has been the home for CBS for many, many, many years. It's in the sort of gates of the traditional Columbia campus. Our 2 new buildings are just one additional subway stop up on the 1 train, which is the main train that runs on the west side, up and down the west side, I should say, but also the community. I mean, we are going to be engaging in such a meaningful way with the community in Harlem that I think will also really enhance the student experience. So those chance encounters you were talking about with, you know, the students and faculty and staff, but also the ways in which we can make an impact in the community is something that I think our students are also really looking forward to. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how that's going to manifest itself.
That's awesome. It's a really great spot, and some waterfront views for some of those classes too.
Yes, I haven't unfortunately had a chance to get a tour quite yet, but I have seen some photos of, you know, peers, you know, colleagues who have from some of the other teams, and I mean, it's going to be sort of distracting to waterfront views as you're sitting in a 3-hour class. You might be a little distracted, but beautiful for sure. I think I'm someone who responds really well to light, so I'm really excited about the light that's going to be accessible from those windows.
And yeah, I just, as you were saying, if people are curious, you can take a look on the website, and there are a lot of renderings. I'm sure there are more pictures. There was a blog when I was there that kind of walked through stages that I know is public. So if people are curious, you can definitely take a look.
And more to come. If you're watching this, you know, we're recording this now before we even move, but I'm sure there'll be even more to come as we actually make the move and are there. So excited.
Great point. And you kind of mentioned this before, there are still some COVID restrictions in place on campus as for visitors specifically. So have there been any big changes to the application process in the past year, either related to COVID or otherwise, that you'd want to address?
Yeah, so there are a couple. I think COVID related specifically, The two that came to mind, or a question we get quite often, and you probably get a lot too, is around like online test taking. So GMAT, taking those tests not in a testing center. And for us, we are absolutely accept scores that, that we see them as 100% valid scores that are taken online. So that's one. The second is just the continued virtual events. As I mentioned, campus is still unfortunately closed to visitors, to prioritize the space for our students, because we are fully back in person for our students. But those would probably be the two biggest process changes, I'd say, as a result of COVID that are still sort of in place. But more broadly, I think a couple of things come to mind. One is around our general application process. This year, we still have our traditional goals essay. So our essay number one now allowed our applicants to choose between 2 of 3 options for the essays. So that's different for us. Historically, it was just sort of like, these are the options, please answer these essays. But I think giving folks choice really has been amazing to read, and really interesting just to see what people choose and what's important to them. And that was what was important to us, was we really wanted people to talk about the things that were important to them so we could get to know them even better. And then we actually reduced our recommender requirement. So we only require 1 recommendation right now, which is different than the 2 we had required in the past. So I wouldn't say those are COVID related, but pretty big process changes that I think our applicants were a little at first stunned by, but we think have enhanced the application process. And then finally, I'd say the biggest general application process changed as we joined the consortium. And so there is now an opportunity for folks to actually apply to Columbia Business School through the consortium. And that is brand new territory for us, since we're the newest school to join. So again, excited to see from an admissions perspective how that all plays out with our process and building our class. But we're excited about that on our side.
That's awesome. I know that the team was talking about that for a while, and it's really exciting to see that come to fruition. I do have a couple of follow-up questions because of the things that we hear from our clients. But one that I wanted to point out, I don't know that it's necessarily a question, but something that I noticed was that you guys also did change a very long-standing policy about recommenders submitting after you submit or after a deadline, and then accepting test scores after a deadline. Could you just briefly go over kind of what the policy is now?
Yep, absolutely. So thank you for pointing that out. So we did historically accept standardized test scores beyond, once you've hit submit, you then had sort of an additional grace period to take an additional test. And we changed that for operational purposes. To be quite honest, we were finding that we weren't able to give responses to our applicants in the time frame that we wanted to, because we ended up in a lot of circumstances waiting for information that ultimately wouldn't always arrive. So we enhanced the operations on our team and really, I think, ultimately are delivering better service to our applicants. And because of rolling admissions, the way that CBS operates, right? We don't operate under rounds, we operate under rolling admissions. We always said, don't hit submit on your application until it's as strong as it can possibly be for you, right? So to us, there's no reason for you to submit your application 3 weeks earlier. If you're going to take a test in 3 weeks, you can wait to submit your application until 3 weeks later. So that was one change that you mentioned. The second, we adjusted the policy a little bit, but there still is a 2-week grace period for recommenders. So it used to be 3, we've reduced it to 2. We haven't really seen any problems arise there. again, we understand what your recommenders do is somewhat out of your control as an applicant, but still do provide them that 2-week grace period. So you can submit, feel accomplished, get it off your plate, but then, within 2 weeks, we have to hear from your recommenders again to keep with the process and delivering decisions in a timely manner.
Yeah. I was excited to hear about these changes because I think that they benefit both the team, but they benefit the applicant immensely too. It really does kind of not force you, but encourage you to do things on a more practical timeline. And Columbia is still much more generous than a lot of schools when it comes to recommenders getting their letters in. So I was excited for a lot of reasons to kind of hear these small changes that I know make a big impact in the way that decisions are able to be made for everyone.
And I think that I'm glad to hear that you're pleased to see a different side of the applicants than maybe we do. But I think when you hit submit on an application, you want to be done. Like you don't you want to say bye-bye until, and learn what happens next. I think the fact that we, remove that one, potential extra step beyond hitting submit ultimately is doing a service to our applicants.
Yep.
Who just can say, great, now I can go celebrate with my friends and family that I've submitted this application, and the rest is up to the fates,
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And then other follow-up question, curious if you have any advice on which of the 3 essays to choose. If someone's like really stuck on how to choose 2 of the 3, do you have any advice at this point, given you've only been giving this option for several months?
It's hard.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the MBA process, it's a lot about reflection. And I think it's a lot about honesty with oneself. And so if you feel, and this is sort of a preview for some of my advice, I give, which is sort of answer the prompts. If you feel you can really answer the prompts meaningfully of 2 over the other, pick those. We really don't have a preference of which we want to see. Again, it's about being able to really answer the prompts in a meaningful way and telling us about you. And so I don't have better guidance than that. I wish I did.
I think that's great. I think what people want to hear or understand is that there truly is no preference. There's no right selection. And I think people spend a lot of time racking their brains. And I do think we'll talk about this a little bit more later, but people rack their brains about which 2 do the committee want me to pick.
Right.
And the answer is there are no 2 correct choices. So we'll talk a little bit more about it later. But what is the most common misconception you think that there is about Columbia Business School?
Yes, when you shared this question at a time, I was trying really hard to think about what it is now, because I think when I joined, and you know this too, we had this reputation that our students were sharp-elbowed. I think that's just by nature of being in New York City. People view New York City as a pretty sharp-elbowed place. And that we were really a finance-only school. Again, I think just given our history and deep relationships with the finance industry and being stone's throw from Wall Street, of course, we are very strong in finance. But I think we've sort of said goodbye to both of those misconceptions, thankfully, over even the last 2 years, so to speak, that I have. Even 2 years, but I've been here for 4, but over the last 2 years, I'd say that's really shifted with the COVID changes and just the availability of the thought research from all of our centers and programs that became available more widely virtually, right? We did everything virtually, and we really worked as a school to make that available to prospective students and just the general public. I think now, probably what I hear is sort of a lack of community. People have this misconception that we're a commuter school. that there's not really a deep community here, and it just like couldn't be more wrong. And I think the best way to debunk it is really to have applicants, and I encourage people to do this all the time, speak to current students about their experience within the community, ask them how they felt supported. Because oftentimes, as much as I wish they always said it was from the resources in the administration, it often is that, but that's usually a second to my classmates, my peers, my learning team, the people who, you know, are peers of mine are the reason why I love CBS and the reason how I feel supported. So we as an admissions committee, and I know you know this because you sat on it, work really hard to find people who are going to continue to further that community. And so I just think it's the biggest misconception that in the moment that we're a commuter school, because a lot of people actually end up, if they were in New York before business school, moving uptown to the Upper West Side area to be close to campus. People who, whether you move, you know, from Brooklyn or across an ocean, a lot of people do find themselves in this general area. And I, because I'm currently on the Upper West Side, I'm originally from New York. I love it here. And it's a really great place to live in case you've never visited. Shameless plug for the Upper West Side, but you know, I think people really want to center their gravity to CBS and to campus for these 2 years specifically, because what's otherwise? You're taking time out of your career, you're taking time out of your social life that is probably already really robust where you are, to have this experience. Like, our students want to immerse themselves in it. Do you agree with that? Do you think that that's true from your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. I was thinking that you put it so eloquently, and how the team, the administration, and the students kind of come together to create a cohesive community. In my head, I was like, oh, well, I have so many friends that lived in Chelsea or the West Village, and that it was kind of a joke that you say to your non-CBS friends, like, your New York non-CBS friends, bye, I'll see you in 2 years, maybe at weddings sometime in between. And then you go off and you do your MBA. And even though the proximity is the same, the amount of time you're spending with those people is a little bit different. And I used to joke that the only reason I got to see those friends is because I was too on campus. So I would completely agree. And I think what's so great about the New York or the Northeast folks that we admit is that something that we looked for in an application, at least in the past, was like this willingness to want to show people around your city. Like, oh, I can't wait to take people to my favorite spin class, or to, you know, lead tours to museums or theaters, etc. So I would completely agree. There's like this willingness or this interest in sharing that New York knowledge.
And I think, as you said that, I obviously saw, I was saying with, yes, absolutely, that is a huge part of the responsibility, I think, that our New York students, previously New York-based students feel for all of the other students that come. I also think there's something really to be said for seeing New York through the eyes of a person who hadn't lived here before. So I also know plenty of folks who were in New York before business school, and they're like, I've explored new neighborhoods, I've explored new things that I did because my CBS friends wanted to do them, but I never would have necessarily experienced before. So even talk about all that the school itself offers, but, you know, make New York your playground. As part of doing the MBA, there's benefits that come both ways, regardless of whether you were poor or not. And I've learned a lot about New York. Again, I'm from here, just given, you know, the friends that I've made who are CBS students, and the clubs and organizations that have sponsored events around the city, which I'm really appreciative of.
Yeah, I agree. I've heard that a lot from New York-based students as well. So talking a little bit more about the application, what do you wish that applicants would do differently when applying?
Good question. So I think, and I sort of previewed this before, but I think answering the question, it sounds so obvious, Nicole, and I know this because you did a lot of reading in your time, and you probably read essays now, I would presume, in your current role. It's something that seems so simple, but it's something that really often gets missed. I mean, we read a lot of applications. We read a lot of essays about goals. It's clear when you're responding with an essay that was actually a prompt for a different school. Like, we ask specific things. And I think you can get really, really stressed out about, oh my gosh, am I like, you can overanalyze
Yes.
about responding to essay prompts. But I really think at the end of the day, if you can just take a breath and say, okay, did I actually answer the question? I think it would make a really big difference in the reading experience for the committee. I have a lot of tips and tricks of ways that, people could potentially mitigate the concern that I'm voicing around, answering the questions that I can share if that's helpful.
Yeah, I'd love to hear your tips. I'll just say before that I, even at Columbia in my current role, I would always say to people, like, I'm not saying this to be patronizing, but please read the question, and please read the question again and again. And something we often emphasize with clients is that even though the themes of different essays at different schools are the same, maybe goals, fit, etc., they are not the same question. And it's very easy to tell if you try to smush one essay's content into another essay. And so it's glad to hear that you can detect that. I know that I could detect it very easily, and I emphasize this with people. So it's good to hear from you that it is real. So yeah, any tips that you have to kind of bolster authenticity or mitigate this like cookie cutter way of approaching essays?
Yeah, so something that I encourage people to do is identify someone in your life, probably not going to be your significant other, although they probably will want to read your essays too, probably won't be a parent or a guardian or a grandparent, someone who knows you, but doesn't know you. This is going to sound a bit like at your core, who isn't close to you, like your best friend in the entire world. Give them your essays and don't give them the prompt. And first of all, have them share with you, okay, does this sound like me? Does this feel like me? You know me somewhat well, but not so well. The reason for that is because you don't want the person filling in holes for you, right? Like your loving parent, they might say, I know this about Nicole, so I'm going to sort of fill in that gap and can connect the dots in a way that an admissions committee member cannot, because we don't know you that well. Again, a person who's like a little removed, have them give a little bit of feedback, not necessarily the proofreading, not the periods and the commas and, but general thoughts, and then have them predict what the prompt was, because then you can really say, okay, I answered the question, or, oh, something's amiss here. Like, they didn't catch what my dream job was. I said my short-term and long-term, but missed the dream job part of the question for us. I'm going with the goals question.
Right.
I think it's a really good way to see if you missed the mark or if you hit it.
Yeah, I think that's a great piece of advice, a really smart approach. Something we've talked about for many years.
Yeah.
It's a trick. It's a trick and it's a tip. My go-to tip aside from that one was always like, join these admissions events, especially now that they're all virtual. It's really easy, no matter where you are, to tune in or listen to recordings and listen to students talk about what they loved, how they took advantage of the community. And it kind of helps you write your essay or, determine your fit for you. I will take the easy way out, listen to what other people talk about, and it helps you much more clearly articulate and paint the picture of like how you're going to succeed at that school.
Definitely. You took the words out of my mouth. Future question you may or may not be asking me, that was my response, but I think there's no better way to not only show to the AdCom that you're excited, and this doesn't just go for Columbia, this goes for any school applicant is applying for, right? Like, there are ways to engage with pretty much every school out there. Do it. It will serve you because, okay, great, the admissions committee can see you're engaged and enthusiastic, but also it will serve you in the process. Like, it will actually help you determine, do I want to go to the school or not? So easy. And we recognize that applicants have full-time jobs and have a lot of things going on their plate. So we're not saying, you have to participate in every single event we offer, but we do, to your point, offer a lot of events now that we're virtual, which you worked tirelessly on while you were, so I know you know. So do participate.
Yeah. So I'm assuming this was some of your advice on the advice that you would give a candidate about how to think about preparing for Columbia or to Columbia.
Yeah, it was. You hit the nail on the head around the events, the recorded events, shameless plug for those because they're, I think, really robust for Columbia. I think every school is going to be different, but our admissions team really prides itself on making ourselves accessible. So, we really try and prioritize the needs of our prospective students as best we can. So, reach out to admissions committee members, get to know us. We're people too. I think that that's really the best way to prepare, and talk to current students. They're before, they're going to give you such good insight into, okay, do I see myself in this person? Like, my goals aren't exactly the same. Maybe how I get involved in terms of clubs isn't the same, but are they my people? I think that's really important.
So what everyone's probably wondering is, what's the best way to connect with a current student?
Yeah, so this is good timing actually, because we just did our intake. We just had club day. So for everyone's knowledge, Columbia Business School is a big day where all the clubs come out and sort of showcase who they are. The leadership teams of the clubs will have a little booth when it's in person. I think it was back in person outdoors this year, actually, again. It had, the last couple of years due to the pandemic, but so we work very closely with a club on campus called the Hermes Society, which is about 250 student ambassadors who work with our office very closely on a whole host of events and activities for both prospective students and admitted students. And there is a portal that's available on our website. It's our Contact a Student portal, where you can input a club of interest or an area of study of interest. We have 14 different areas of study at CBS. Maybe you want to straddle a couple of them. You can reach out to students across those different areas of study, different clubs, different locations, geographies. Hometown is one of the available drop-down parameters, and the database will spit out names and email addresses for you of students who want to talk to people in your shoes. They were in your shoes not too long ago. We just had club day. We just did an intake of about 80 new members. So we're really excited about those first year students who are equally as excited to speak to prospective students. So if you just Google Columbia Business School Contact a Student portal, that database should come up pretty quickly. I think probably the first or second link on a Google search. And of course, if for some reason something very specific doesn't have a student that you can connect with, you can also always reach out to admissions.
Mhm. Yeah, I think this was a great tool while I was there, because what I really liked about it was that if you maybe you selected Healthcare Industry Association as the club, and that was like the only filter that you put in, then it would give you kind of any Hermes Society member that indicated HCIA as one of their clubs. And then you could actually see all of the other kind of aspects of their candidacy. So you could see one who had indicated that, and then you could see what geographic location do they subscribe to? What other clubs are they involved in? What was their area of study? Are they J-term or are they August entry? That way you could pick it and then kind of say, oh, okay, but I would rather talk to someone from Asia, or would like to talk to someone from the West. So I thought that was a great tool, great tip. I only have one last question for you. What do you think the future looks like for Columbia Business School?
Man, I wish I had a crystal ball. So I think the Manhattanville move is going to be a huge change for us, as I already talked about. And what the future will hold as a result of that move, I can't predict. I think really positive. I think the experiences of our students will, it will really evolve as we get more comfortable in this new space. Hard to believe, but we actually had a new dean take over at the helm of the business school, Dean Costis Maglaris, a little over 2 years ago at this point, so like right before the pandemic started. He's been really focused and led us through pretty unbelievably this time within Columbia Business School's history, not only moving to Manhattanville, but also dealing with the pandemic and managing that. And, you can hopefully agree and attest to it because you were with us during so much of the pandemic, but, the way in which we changed course in April, essentially mid-semester, to be online, and then shortly thereafter to do what was called high flex, to have this blend of in-person and remote learning, which a lot of other schools weren't able to make happen. The ways in which we supported our students, the students who are international, who needed to go back to their home country to study, he really led us through that. And so he's been really focused on doing that. And so I'm actually really excited for the future of CBS, to get back to your question, to see what his vision really come to life. I don't think that managing a wild pandemic, getting the school through it, was really what he envisioned when he assumed the role. So, I know he has a pretty extensive vision that I'm really excited to see him be able to implement and enact. I can't really share much more than that in terms of what that vision will look like, but really excited to see what comes next for the school.
Yeah, I mean, of course, I'm also excited to see. I remember when he joined, it was like 2 summers ago, essentially, and he really talked about injecting data analytics, data science, and tech, and more so into a curriculum that already was very good at that. And you could see these small increments of change since then, which I found really impressive, because I think he and the other leadership team was really good at seeing what is coming next, what is in the future, and how do we educate leaders for 2 years from now rather than for today. But
and also, let's not forget about our alums. We haven't talked that much about our alums, but he had this vision for what's called Alumni Edge, which is to really help retool and complement the education that our alums had maybe 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago with what's required of business leaders for today. And that is sort of an advantage of being a CBS alum. And so building that out as well, which he did get to do pandemic and right before everything really went crazy. So yes, you're spot on in terms of what we're giving to our students, but I also think that, you know, when I talk to a lot of students about ROI, right? Like, what am I getting from CBS? It's like, okay, but it doesn't just stop when you, in, you know, May of whatever year, it continues. And Dean Maglaris is really thinking about that continuation ongoing. We all didn't mention, probably should, he was a professor at CBS for many, many years. So it's not like he came from another place. He really knows the core of the school. And I think that really impacts the vision and the success of the school in the future.
Yeah, Alumni Edge is a great example because before, and still, I think alums could audit classes for free for life in person. That obviously was limited to people who were local or visiting. And Alumni Edge scaled like the most popular courses to be on a virtual format so that anyone in the world could attend them. And I love that you brought it up because as a staff member, we were also allowed to take Alumni Edge courses, and I did Python for Managers course. I was a little skeptical about online learning, as I think a lot of people were, and it was so incredibly done. It was with like two professors, like two of our most popular professors. I say still, two of the most professors at Columbia. And it was just so well done. There were like live TAs that you had office hours. I was really impressed with it. So I think that is a great point that, you know, they are trying to continue that education and make sure people have those contemporary skill sets. And then the other thing that I'll highlight that I've been impressed with during our conversation, that leadership has really supported joining the consortium. So I'm excited to see how that plays out and what that means for the class in the future too.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, Dean Maglaris, when he joined, one of the first things that when he took on the dean, one of the first things that he did was he actually instated an inaugural vice dean of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So the commitment that Columbia Business School is making to creating inclusive leaders, part of the reason why we added a question around our Phillips pathway for inclusive leadership is because that is an integral part of the MBA experience for CBS. And I think a lot of that stems from Dean Maglaris and his commitment. So it's sort of manifesting itself in a lot of different ways. One of them being, so thank you for highlighting that again.
Yeah.
And it's 100% a part of that bigger vision that I was before.
Yeah. I wish we had so much more time to talk. I'd love to talk more about the Phillips pathway. All those, applicants will learn about that in the application, which is great. But Jordan, I can't thank you enough for your time. It's such a pleasure to speak with you, to be able to see you again. And I think that this conversation was incredibly fun for me, but I think it'll be incredibly helpful for those who are considering applying to Columbia in the future. And for those of you watching, thank you for taking the time. You can learn more about Columbia from their website and learn more about how we can support you from personalmbacoach.com. So Jordan, it's a Friday, so I hope that you have a really nice and relaxing weekend.
Thank you so much, Nicole. Thanks so much to Personal MBA Coach for thinking of us. And good luck, everyone.
Okay, great. Okay, great. So now we're going to share just a couple more slides and then we'll go on to Q&A. So I hope everyone enjoyed the presentation. So of course, we sent a lot of folks to Columbia and love Columbia and many other top schools. So most of the schools that you can think about, and our clients had over $6.5 million in scholarships last year. Slide advances. So this is just kind of a quick overview of some of the things that we do. I mentioned this a little bit before as far as GMAT and GRE tutoring with our in-house software where we drive through the sessions. All of our tutors have at least a 780 or above on the GMAT. We'll help with story brainstorming, development, selecting the schools. I have a lot of former interviewers across many of the top schools, and we have some of the highest success rates in the industry. If you want to chat more with us, contact information is here. Nicole is just Nicole at personalmbacoach.com. I'm Scott at personalmbacoach.com. And here's the website. And now we'll go on to Q&A. So Nicole will answer some questions. If you haven't asked questions, you don't have to ask a question about Columbia. This can be about anything that is on your mind, and we're happy to help to answer some of these.
Thanks so much, Scott. It was really fun to watch that again. Really love talking to Jordan, and she was recently promoted to director, so really happy for her. So like Scott said, you can use the comments to ask any questions, not just about Columbia, but about admissions. I see someone commented on CBS Follies. If you're not familiar and you're interested in Columbia, taking a look on YouTube and looking at some of the Follies videos. They're very tongue-in-cheek, but I think it kind of demonstrates like that fun, community-driven aspect of Columbia. And then we did receive a question about recorded events versus live sessions and whether or not that can hinder the admissions odds. It's actually a very good question. You'll probably go on any top school's website, see a list of recorded events, see a list of upcoming virtual events. There are two things that I'll say here. First is that not all schools will measure that engagement. It's going to vary between schools. Schools like Harvard, they say explicitly that they don't look at that type of engagement in terms of attending events, talking to students, whereas schools like Columbia and MIT do. And so technically the way that it works is when you register for an event and you attend an event, that will kind of filter into your application. And so if you're on your own watching recorded events, that might certainly make for a stronger application, or stronger essays, a stronger, defending of why that school for you. But you'll also want to try to carve out time to attend, at least one or two of the live virtual events. I think there's a lot of value in being able to have that on your application, but then also a lot of these live events are interactive. So it does allow you to connect with current students, alums, or admissions officers in a meaningful way before applying. Okay, is there any drawback of submitting an executive assessment score instead of a GMAT score to Columbia? Yes and no. If you're going to do incredibly well on the GMAT, the school, and I'll say this kind of goes for any school that is considering or taking the EA, that's like CBS, NYU, Duke, among many others that are now taking it for full-time. If you can do incredibly well on the GMAT, you should take the GMAT. These schools are more familiar with the GMAT. It's a little bit more standardized and ubiquitous. And so if you can do really well on that test, take it, show that score. If the test is more challenging, and I think the thought process was that there are a lot of great candidates who just really can't get over the hump with the GMAT. And because the EA really combines integrative reasoning into that overall score, that this does allow candidates to put forth a strong overall test score, a strong overall candidacy, that you should take the EA and submit that score. And that way you can show that you are, prepared to succeed in the classroom without having to go up against some of those really tough averages at these top schools. Yeah, I think the GMAT, EA, GRE topic is a tough one. And we get a lot of questions about that. And that's something that we do help clients with a lot, is really kind of understanding based on your background, based on your target schools, what is going to make the most sense for you. Again, any other questions in the comments? Scott, one thing that I'll say that I really enjoyed about the conversation with Jordan is that there were a lot of really strong tips in terms of authenticity, in terms of essays. Good tips for essays specifically to Columbia, but I think that those tips should be emphasized as something that goes for everyone applying to any school, and something that we work a lot with our clients on. We do unlimited rounds of editing of the essays. And that's because you can't really control how long it's going to take to get that perfect essay, but we have these discussions prior to the essay writing that really does emphasize authenticity. And we don't just spend time saying, you need to be authentic. We talk to you about your background. We understand what challenges you have faced, what your key accomplishments have been. And we really take those aspects and we brainstorm with you, and we help kind of tie that into your story, weave that into your essays. And I think that's probably why we have such immense success with Columbia, but kind of across the M7. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting. I was talking to somebody this morning, this evening for them. They were in China, but we were talking about some of the differences in schools and essays and timing. What's the calendar and how many schools can I do before round 2 and all that sort of thing. And, often at the beginning, the answer becomes, it depends on the school. It depends how much time we want to spend on that school versus another one. And, there's some programs where they don't want to hear about the school at all. And so your, authentic interest in the school is just not part of the application. And then other schools, it really is part of the application. And so, figuring out what does authenticity mean, that's going to be a different answer based on the school as well, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think we talk about this a lot, is like a lot of the essay questions across schools seem the same. They seem to be asking about goals. There are like MIT, Stanford, Wharton, a little bit more of a curveball. But even though a lot of these essays seem the same, they really aren't asking kind of those same questions, or at least they don't deserve the same answers. There are these nuances that I know we work a lot on addressing in applications.
And really pay attention to every word. I know this is a bit more minor, but a few years ago, Kellogg changed one word of their essay, their first essay. Provide a recent example of a time when you did something. We won't go into the whole question now. And just adding that word recent, from one year to the next, shows you that they want things that have happened within a certain period of time. And we don't have time to get into this today, but there's certain schools where, if you write something that's 4 years old or older, they don't want to see that at all. And even some places that want more recent recommenders versus older recommenders, so you really have to sort of, think about what differences are across the schools. So I know we might have some other questions coming, but Nicole, really appreciate your time in this interview. This was so much fun for me to watch. This was great. And, and Jordan, thank you again for your help. I think as far as, if you want to engage, with us and kind of chat about things further, website, personalmbacoach.com. Even if you're not in the market for anything, we have a lot of just downloadables and guides, free advice and videos. So, check them out, and we hope that they can be of help. We'll stay on for another minute or so, see if there are any other last questions from anybody.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. It was a pleasure, and I'm very appreciative to Jordan for taking her time out, because the fall is the busiest time for admissions, reading applications, hosting events. But she was a trooper, as she always is. I do see this age-old question of, what is a good EA score? And there isn't enough data on websites, given my experience at Columbia, there's not enough data to really say what is a good EA score. Also because applications are looked at in a holistic way. And so they're looking at your undergraduate GPA, your experience, et cetera. But people want a number. And so the number that I would have said while I was at CBS, the number I'd say now is like shoot for a 155 or above. I would say 160 or above is a good place to be. But, you know, if you're hitting under 155, kind of thinking about what are the other strengths of your application and how you can highlight those.
Yeah. And then depending on the school and the program, some schools might value the quant more than the verbal. And so you do have to, you know, kind of think about this. So I think maybe we have time for one last question. And then I think GMAT Club will probably close it off. So Nicole, do you want to answer this one? You actually have a better answer than I would have.
About attending events post-submission.
Right.
Yeah. So, you know, is there value to attending events post-submission? I would say if you're attending in a virtual event, or maybe an in-person event in the future post-submission, it should probably happen within 2 to 3 weeks of your submitting, or else it's already going to get into the hands of someone and that process is already going to be started. So there might be value after, if it's kind of in that close time frame. Otherwise, once you hit submit, there isn't too much that you should be doing. I wouldn't say, you know, reaching out to admissions officers, unless you're really curious about something and trying to still make decisions about which school you'd want to be admitted to. You shouldn't be reaching out to students for the sake of it helping your candidacy. Really, a lot of that stuff should be happening before you hit submit.
Great. Well, thanks everyone for coming. Thanks GMAT Club for hosting. Please like the GMAT Club YouTube channel, subscribe to it. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, Personal MBA Coach. And Jordan, once again, thanks so much for this interview. It was so much fun. Wishing everyone the best and hope to see you all soon.